Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Sorry, just normally give it a few minutes because people slowly trickle in as we start the webinar off. I think we've got Russ there. You there, mate?
Hey Julian, how you doing?
How are you? Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So you've got two POMs on this today, guys. So that's probably a podcast title in there somewhere. Two POMs on a podcast, something. But we've done a few of these with Russ at the Association of Professional Builders. So when we do these webinars, we're really trying to find people that have really good knowledge of the industry and can deliver great content, because we get a lot of Buildxact subscribers on these webinars, and people that that don't subscribe to us. So we want to make sure that we're giving the best advice we can in the industry. So really appreciate you coming on board, Russ.
No, thanks for the invite. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. So yeah, Russ is the co-founder at the Association of Professional Builders. How long have you been doing this for now, Russ, as a coach, consultant?
Coaching, we started in 2014, so coming up to 9 years now, coaching residential home builders across Australia, New Zealand and North America. Yeah,
and the last few years have probably been the most nuts, have they?
Yeah. I think we've quadrupled our size in the past 2 years alone. Initially, as COVID hit and builders were looking for answers, and then more recently with the different challenges that have come from escalating cost increases in the industry, and how to stay one step ahead of it.
Yeah, well, I feel like when COVID, the whole thing started, I think everyone was really worried about that there'd be no work and things like that, and then it went the opposite way, too much work, and then that affected all the price rises, labor shortages and things like that. And we guess we're still sort of on the tail end of that now, because they haven't really come down, but people's borrowing capacity is lower than it was, well, much lower than it was probably 2 years ago.
There's been a cloud behind every silver lining, hasn't there?
Yeah. Sometimes an invisible cloud as well, I think. So thanks for coming on, mate. So guys, for everyone on the call, obviously the way people price jobs and how you track your costs and manage that ultimately have a big impact in terms of the profit you're going to end up on a job. And obviously people use Buildxact to calculate that. But from speaking with Russ, we have regular catch-ups and just kind of talk about what's happening in the industry, what's he seeing and things like that. And Russ sort of mentioned that people are maybe missing out on how to calculate their fixed expenses into a job. So they think they're making X profit margin, but when you take away all the other expenses that come out in the business, you're really not making as much money as you probably think. So Russ is going to kind of go through a bit on that today, and go into a lot more detail than what I've just covered off in about 10 seconds. Which is great for you guys on the webinar. We'll show you how to use it in Buildxact as well. So if you are using us or you're thinking about using us, I'll show you how to calculate that and add it into your costings in the software. But I'll let Russ do the intro and start up, and screen sharing. There you go, Russ. That works perfectly well for me. So I might just turn my screen off, camera off, Russ, just so you can do your intro without me sort of just sitting there nodding away.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Julian.
All right.
And hey everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today. Really appreciate it. As Julian said, my name is Russ Stephens, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the new process for builders pricing new homes and large renovation projects. Because if you plan on growing your building company, or even if you just want to avoid working for a salary and start making some real money from your building company, then you do need to be pricing your jobs correctly in order to avoid having all of your profit eaten up by your operating costs. Now, before we get started, I just want to make sure that you can hear me nice and clear, guys, and you can see my screen. So please go ahead, type in the chat box. Just let me know whereabouts in Australia or maybe New Zealand that you are tuning in from. I'm on the Gold Coast in Australia right now. I'm looking out across the Pacific Ocean on a lovely, beautiful morning, lovely clear blue skies out there. So guys, please go ahead, let me know that you can see my screen and hear me by just letting me know whereabouts you're tuning in from today. Thanks, Matthew. Matthew in Cranbourne South. We've got Carly in Port Elliot, Linda in Newcastle, Ebony in Tassie, Jason can see from Ballarat, Julie from can't know how to pronounce that, Julie. And then Pierre, even more unpronounceable. I do apologize. But I guess you can all hear me loud and clear, and you can see my screen. Now, just so I can get a feel for who is online with me today, can I please ask you to just let me know what type of building work you are primarily focused on? Is it new homes? Is it renovations, maybe commercial, or something else? Just so I can kind of get a feel for the breakdown that we have: new homes, new builds, high-end renovations, custom new homes, new builds, small commercial, domestic, large renos, remedial. Okay, yeah, looks like predominantly we've got new homes here. Fantastic, thanks. Now, I do have another question, and because I'm interested in finding out how many hours a week you are currently working on average. Now, if you don't know, just take a bit of a guess at this, but on average, how many hours do you feel that you are working on your building company or in your building company, including those evenings and weekends doing the estimates? And just jot that figure down, because we're going to be revisiting that in a moment. Yeah, about 50 hours, 60, 70 there for Mark, putting in a shift there, Mark. But around about 50 seems to be the average. And then one more question: what level of salary are you currently drawing out of your building company? Again, now a rough guesstimate is fine. No one is checking this number. I just want to get a good feel for who's on the call today. So a rough salary of what you're drawing out, because guys, your time's valuable. I want to make sure you get maximum value out of the next 45 minutes or so. Now, next, what I'd like you to do, pull out your phone and go to the calculator app on your phone. And what I'd like you to do is take the salary that you're drawing out of your building company and divide that figure by 48. And then once you've divided your salary by 48, I want you to divide that figure by the number of hours you're working each week on average. And the answer that you now have on your screen is a rough indication of your hourly rate. And let me ask you, how does it compare with the hourly rate you are currently paying your team members, or even the hourly rate you get charged by your subcontractors? Do you feel that you are paying yourself what you are worth, or do you feel you are underpaying yourself? Let me know in the chat box. Are you earning on an hourly rate what you feel you are worth, or do you feel like you're underpaying? Yep, Kurt under, Carly definitely under, Mark under. Yes, it's way under for Mark there. Daniel's underpaying. It's a common thing, and yet the perception out there in the marketplace is that builders are earning a fortune. If only they knew the truth. Now, I'm guessing for a lot of you guys, this is probably not the first presentation that you've attended that told you need to charge more or even add a larger profit margin to the jobs that you're pricing in your building company. So the first thing I do want to mention, guys, is that if you have ever looked at your year-end accounts after they've been finalized by your accountant and thought, well, I've just worked 12 months for that, I am worth way more than I've drawn in salary plus the net profit that was left over, then if that has happened to you, then it's really not your fault. The problem is your pricing model. That, of course, and the old school builders in the industry that tell you you cannot charge more than 20% because you will not win a job. And if you do charge more than 20%, then you're ripping people off. But let me ask you, how successful are those people? I mean, truly successful, rather than just appearing to do well on the outside. Do they have a growing business? Do they have staff to do the work for them? Do they have plenty of free time and large cash reserves and even an investment portfolio that generates enough passive income for them to retire on if they wanted to? Now, the answer is probably not, because all those things are impossible to achieve in this industry simply by adding a 20% gross markup to your projects. So Before we get started, it's just really important to take a moment, get yourself prepared. We do recommend using Google Chrome to view this presentation. So if you do experience any sound or connection problems and you're not using Google Chrome, please try switching over, because that does seem to resolve most problems. And then turn your mobile onto silent, turn off notifications on your computer, close that office door, and maybe even put a do not disturb note on it. And then pull out a pen and a pad and just get ready to take notes, because I will be moving fast in order to get through everything, and I don't want you to miss out, because in this presentation I'm going to reveal the secrets for increasing your margins so that you can make more profit. And if you do stick around with me till the end of this presentation, I will be showing you how you can access this brand new action plan for builders, which currently sells for $497 absolutely free. Now, there is a myth out there regarding pricing construction projects, and that is that builders need to calculate their cost of sales, including materials and labor for a job, and then add a percentage, whether that be 20%, 33%, or 50%, in order to determine the contract price. Now, there are two problems with this strategy. Firstly, it becomes very tempting for builders to trim the markup on those larger projects because they see the dollar amount as quite lucrative. And the other problem is that larger projects take disproportionately longer to build due to their complexity, and that means the ratio of fixed costs to contract value is actually higher. So lower gross profit with higher fixed costs, that means lower net margins, a lot lower, which that is a problem, because you are in business to make money, not to do favors for strangers. And it's why every building company needs to implement a pricing model that takes into account the project timeline and the capacity in the business for running concurrent projects, as well as the cost of sale, in order to get closer to the industry benchmark of 10% net profit. But of course, there are plenty of people out there who believe that in business, cash is king, which does unfortunately lead to a lot of small business owners simply monitoring their bank accounts in order to see how they're doing financially. And that's okay for most businesses. It's not ideal, but it can be okay. However, it is not okay in our industry, because for builders involved in new construction, it is both dangerous and misleading, because new construction is actually cash flow positive. And that means you will have hundreds of thousands of dollars of what we call other people's money inside your bank account that does not appear on the creditor's report in your accounts. And because of that, a lot of builders simply do not fix up their margins until it is too late. And that is because they thought they were doing a lot better than they really were. And none of this is theory. The information I'm sharing with you has come from real builders operating real building companies, guys that understand what is really going on inside the residential industry. Builders like Ryan Stannard, who now runs a $10 million a year building company operating on 25% profit. So that's why we're here today. I know you want to increase your margins and make more profit, and you want to be able to charge more for your services, but without losing potential clients. And the fact is, a proven process for pricing your jobs, that is the key to increasing your margins and making more profit, which is why I'm going to take you through the key components of it in this presentation so that you can implement pricing for profit into your own building company right now. My goal for this presentation is to help two types of residential home builders. For those of you that have a marketing and sales process and want to earn more net profit, I'm going to show you guys how to price your jobs in a way that maintains your net profit, even on those large, more complex jobs. And for those of you who don't have the necessary marketing components in place that will allow you to increase your contract prices, I'm going to show you how to calculate the real break-even point for every single project that you are pricing. Now, the fact is, in order to make more money in business, you have to increase your net profit margin for the company. And to increase your net profit at company level, you need to understand how much each individual project is generating in net profit. So implementing a pricing model that adds net profit to each project, that is the key to increasing your income and getting paid what you're worth. Now, at this point, you may, or you certainly should be thinking, who's this guy to tell me what to do in my own building company? So very, very briefly, guys, around 2011, my daughter Sky Stephens was studying marketing at university, and we were at home. We were discussing the future of the internet, online marketing, and just how fast it was all changing. And within a few weeks, Sky then withdrew from university in order to focus on learning the brand new marketing strategies that were replacing the old school methods. And in order to put these new skills into practice, we decided to start a marketing agency for residential home builders. Now, long story short, things went well and the business grew, but we noticed that for a lot of builders, although we were generating plenty of good opportunities for them, they were still not closing as many of those opportunities into sales as they really should have been, which is why we decided to expand into sales training. And in 2014, we launched Acris Sales Training, which went phenomenally well. It grew really quickly, but the closer we work with these builders, helping them with generating leads and then progressing those leads into contracts, the more we realized they were not making the kind of money they deserved to be earning, given the amount of hours that they were putting in and also the risks that they were taking every time they signed a building contract. So it became clear they needed help with increasing their margins and systemizing their building companies, which is why in 2015, we launched the Association of Professional Builders, a business coaching company dedicated to helping residential home builders to generate more leads, more sales, and increase their margins, but all while improving the building experience for their clients. And thanks to our founding members, we now coach more than 600 residential building companies worldwide who have completed over 1 billion in residential construction projects just in the last 12 months alone. We've literally written the book on best practice for residential home builders, from marketing and sales to operations and financials. And we've also partnered with industry giants such as Buildxact to produce a comprehensive annual report for the residential construction industry. And we're also regularly consulted by the media in both Australia and the United States across TV, radio and print for our insights. Now, I don't say any of this to brag, but I simply want to give you guys context for the information that I'm about to share with you, which has been compiled from our years of experience working with residential home builders. So on that note, let me share something with you. Now, I'd always been baffled by the huge amount of bad debt that was racked up by building companies that went into receivership. Now, in theory, if these companies paid their suppliers net monthly and their subcontractors within 14 days, then if we assume a 50-50 split between the two, that would mean they would only ever owe around 1/12 of their revenue, or 8.33% of their revenue, while they were trading solvent, which means paying your bills as and when they become due and payable. Now, even if they were trading insolvent and payments were being made after, say, 90 days and 30 days respectively, that would still mean they only ever owed 17% of their annual revenue. And yet, typically, when residential building companies go into liquidation, the amount of debt they owe is around 40% of annual revenue, which is quite staggering. Now, some recent examples that demonstrate a trend that has been occurring in our industry for decades is Total Lifestyle Builders, 38%, MJM Projects, 41%, and BA Murphy, 41% of bad debt to revenue. Now, 41% of revenue, that is the equivalent of being 4 months overdue on all supplier and subcontractor invoices. Now, clearly, this is not a situation that could have happened overnight or even within a few months, meaning these companies that fall over owing huge amounts of money were almost certainly trading insolvent for a number of years before they collapsed. However, when we look at any liquidator's report on a failed building company, that is exactly what they expect us to believe. Now, time and time again, we see the same explanation from a forensic accountant who states the building company was trading profitably until recently, when losses started occurring due to X, Y, and Z. Now, at this point, any number of far-fetched explanations are inserted in order to try and explain how a building company suddenly went from making money to losing millions of dollars in a very, very short space of time. Now, it's pretty obvious that there is something else going on here. And the truth is, these building companies did not lose huge amounts of money in their final few months. They were actually losing money slowly over the past 5 or so years because their margins were too low to cover their fixed expenses. However, because their end of year accounts were not correctly adjusted to reflect the income they had received in advance through the front loading of their jobs, no one was aware that they were operating at a loss for all this time. Not the owner of the building company, the accountant, or even the licensing authorities that granted permission for a loss-making company to continue racking up more and more debt. Now, in truth, it is no one's fault. If anything, it is the jargon that we use in the industry that confuses accountants and leads to incorrect financial statements being prepared. However, all the time, the owner of a residential building company believes they are making money. They have no reason to question their pricing model, much less realizing that they need to fix it up before it's too late. So it became very clear to us that a new way of pricing residential construction projects was urgently needed. A pricing model that would factor in a building company's fixed costs, ensuring that a net profit would be made on every single project. And that is why in 2015, we developed the Pricing for Profit Calculator, a tool that allowed builders to price projects of different sizes and varying complexity and profitability without any guesswork at all. And it also allowed builders to identify a true break-even point for every single project that they were pricing so that they knew their walk-away point. And the walk-away point is the price at which they would be better off sitting on a beach rather than taking on a project that was going to steal from their own personal reserves. And it also allowed builders to identify the real cost per day for every day a project was delayed. Now, a lot of the time, this hidden cost does get overlooked when pricing a variation, or when a subcontractor fails to show up, delaying the entire project by a day or more. However, these hidden costs, they come straight off the bottom line for a building company. So it's very, very important to be aware of them and then factor them into your decision-making process. And like I say, none of this is theory. Builders that have used the Pricing for Profit calculator have consistently increased their margins on larger projects. Now, this particular custom home builder in Burleigh Heads in Queensland, Australia, just signed up a $1.64 million contract after applying a 30% markup. And that is something they would not have dreamed of doing previously, when they were typically adding just 20% to each project, and then even less to those larger projects. So 3 things I'm going to take you through today are the 2 figures inside your business plan that determine the price you need to charge in order to make a net profit, how to calculate the true break-even point for every project before you quote a price, and how to add a net margin to your projects rather than a gross margin. Now, some residential home builders may be thinking, well, business plans, they are complex documents that just sit in a drawer and then never get looked at. Well, let me share a quick story with you. In 2007, I attended an annual conference for a franchised building company. And one of the speakers at the conference was a master franchisor from New Zealand who had just sold his company for $15 million to a private equity group. Now, this successful entrepreneur, he talked about a lot of different aspects regarding what it takes to run a successful business, and in particular, a successful building company. And one of the things that really struck in my mind was what he said about business plans. And after emphasizing just how crucial it was for every business owner to produce and update their own business plan, he then shared how he carries his own business plan with him everywhere he goes, and he refers to it every single day. Now, when I think back to that presentation, I remember seeing this business leader standing there on stage with his briefcase containing his business plan right by his side. Now, I know he didn't literally carry his business plan with him everywhere, and he certainly didn't carry it with him on stage that day, but that's the visual memory that has formed over time, and it's what I think of every time I refer to our own business plan. Now, at the Association of Professional Builders, we now use a one-page business plan along with an online spreadsheet that is constantly updated in real time using past results that affect our future projections. And that keeps us constantly focused on what needs to happen in the business today in order to achieve our goals of tomorrow. Now, I often think about that day at a conference where the importance of creating and then maintaining an up-to-date business plan, it was stressed over and over again. And I wonder how big and detailed the speaker's own business plan was. I mean, did it fill up that briefcase, and what exactly did it cover, and how much detail did it go into? Well, the truth is, business plans do not need to be overly detailed or even complicated. They really can be as simple as a budget forecast. Now, the thought of creating a 60-page business plan, it can be daunting for a lot of business owners, and there's nothing wrong with creating a 60-page business plan. We run a one-day workshop every month where builders create their own business plan using our comprehensive template. It's a great workshop for builders to attend in order to create their first business plan, but then to attend annually in order to update it and then optimize it for the year ahead. However, step one is always to begin by creating a forecast. And the reason being, when you know what you want to achieve in terms of the numbers, the actions that you will need to take in order to reach those numbers becomes very, very clear. So rather than getting bogged down in the details of a full comprehensive business plan, here are the fundamentals for creating a budget forecast, which is more than adequate in order for you to implement the pricing for profit strategy. Now, there are a number of key performance indicators or KPIs that a builder needs to budget for and then monitor monthly. However, two of the KPIs that are used in the pricing for profit formula are the annual fixed expenses and the number of jobs you plan to sign over the next 12 months. Now, in terms of the annual fixed expenses, this figure must include a market salary for everyone working in the building company, including the owners of the business. Now, as a rough guide, this typically equates to around 5% of annual revenue for most building company owners. However, that percentage might not be realistic for your own particular business. And that means you need to look at the job market in order to assess how much it would cost to replace the owners who are working in the business. Now, remember, if you are drawing on a director's loan or even drawing profits at year end instead of taking a regular salary, then your annual fixed expenses are not real, and they will need to be adjusted via journal entries in order to avoid underpricing your jobs. Now, the second KPI that forms part of your business plan and is an integral part of pricing your future jobs, that is the number of projects you plan to sign over the next 12 months. Now, this will be the equivalent of the target revenue that you have for your business for the year divided by the average contract value that your building company is targeting. And while contract values, they can and they will vary, it's important to operate in a reasonably tight bandwidth and niche. So targeting high-end custom homes and then plug in the gaps with smaller remodeling jobs, it's not a good strategy in terms of marketing, operations, or even planning. It is much better, and it is a lot more profitable to solely focus on one thing, such as high-end custom homes. Now, a quick review of previous jobs and looking at those actual figures for gross profit per week per job, that will normally reveal that operating outside of a company's main niche is not as profitable as staying in your lane. Now, a lot of the time, saying no to potential clients can be a lot more profitable than saying yes. Now, some builders believe they don't need a business plan just yet because their building company isn't quite big enough. However, it does not matter what size the business, or even if it's a brand new business that's not even started trading yet, because a failure to plan is a plan to fail. And the place to start when creating a business plan is at the bottom rather than the top. So rather than thinking about how many homes you want to build over the course of the next year, start with the net profit you want to make after drawing a salary. And once you have that figure in place, you can then target a realistic net margin and add the budgeted fixed expenses in order to establish what the gross profit needs to be, and then the revenue along with the average contract value and the number of jobs. Now, if that sounds complicated, it's really not when you have the right template. And these are the kind of templates that we share with our members. And the reason for this is once you have a plan in place, that is when you start making real money in business rather than simply paying yourself a wage. That's what Claire Harbison and literally hundreds of other builders have found once they implemented this process. So guys, let me know in the chat box. I just want to make sure that you haven't dozed off back there and I'm sitting here talking to myself. Is this all making sense so far? Is this kind of resonating with you? Type in the chat box. I'll grab a quick sip of water. I just want to make sure that I'm not talking to myself here. Excellent. Thanks guys. We got Mark, Daniel. Excellent. Thank you. Awesome. Great stuff. Okay, so a lot of custom home builders think, well, the bigger the job, the lower the percentage margin required to cover my fixed expenses. So let me explain why it's actually the opposite. Now, a common mistake that is made by builders when pricing a larger than normal project is to reduce the margin percentage after looking at the gross profit as a dollar figure. Now, the thinking behind this is that a larger amount of revenue will lead to a larger gross profit, and that translates to more net profit. And as a result, it can be tempting to then reduce the gross margin percentage being applied to those larger projects, either in an attempt to ensure that job is won, or maybe even out of a sense of guilt after seeing the dollar amount of gross profit that is being added to a project. However, what does tend to get overlooked is the increased amount of fixed expenses that must be applied to those larger jobs. And this is because of the extended timeline of a larger project, which then reduces the number of projects that can be completed by the building company in a 12-month period. Now, also, the project complexity on those larger jobs impacts the number of concurrent projects that can be run at any one time. So by applying the same amount for fixed expenses to a larger project, that means the gross profit is reduced, which results in a significant reduction in the net profit for the business. Now, it is exactly the same problem when a builder is expected to apply what we call mates rates to a project for a family member or even a member of staff. Now, the builder may feel like they are doing the build for nothing, but the reality is they are actually running the project at a loss and effectively subsidizing the build out of their own pocket. Now, this exact scenario happened to one of our private clients just a few years back. And after looking at their numbers for the previous 2 quarters, I could see that their gross margin was dropping off slightly. It was nothing catastrophic, but being 2% below the budgeted forecast on a $12 million a year business, that was cause for concern. Therefore, I decided to investigate the actual gross profit on each and every job during those quarters. And again, there was nothing too alarming because some jobs were up 1 or 2% versus the budget, and then others were down by roughly the same amount. So they canceled each other out. And on the surface, that was good news because it meant that this building company was not hemorrhaging margin through the construction phase. However, the fluctuating gross margins on each of their jobs, that was definitely standing out to me. Now, this building company had been working for us for around 2 years, and they were well on the way to hitting the industry target of 25% gross margin, which is a 33% markup on every job they quoted. Now, this was a great achievement for them, considering they were adding just 20% markup when they first came to us. And that actually equates to a 16.6% gross margin and just 2% net profit. Now, that is not nearly enough for a building company to grow safely and securely. However, as I looked at the gross margin for each of these projects, there was one job that stood out like a clown at a funeral, because it had a starting gross margin of just 5%. Now, who in their right mind would sign a fixed price building contract with just 5% profit built in? It had to be wrong. So I asked the owner of the building company, I said, what happened here? And he said, that's my brother's home. It's all good though, because he also works in the company. So we just add on a nominal amount to cover our costs. It's something we do for all the family. Now, keep in mind that there were 5 siblings working in this particular building company. So that is a lot of free work going on. Only it wasn't free work at all. It was subsidized builds, because the real cost of running a project for this particular building company and practically every other residential building company is not 5%, it's 15%. And that means the company was actually losing 10% on this particular build. Or if we put that into a dollar figure, $87,900. Now, that may seem like a tax efficient way to run a family business, but unless that $87,900 is being counteracted by a reduced salary for the benefiting employee, then it is not providing a true reflection of how the business is performing. And it's also not fair on the other stakeholders who will now have to build a home of similar value just to get their fair share out of the business. Now, over the years, I've seen this situation play out plenty of times with mates rates for family, friends, and staff members who were offered a crazy low price just because they work in the business, or even potential clients with a high value project who were offered a discounted rate in order to win the job. Now, the problem is, these reduced contract prices are not being run at cost or even at a small profit. They are actually losing the building company money once those fixed expenses have been factored in. And the fact is, every building company has a finite capacity, which is based on their structure and their available resources, which all have to be paid for through their fixed expenses. So every job that is taken on utilizes those fixed expenses, which then reduces the capacity for the building company to take on other work, regardless as to whether it's a client build or maybe a favor to a friend. Now, in order to help builders understand their true break-even point for every project they sign, which means understanding their fixed expenses as opposed to only knowing what their break-even point is just for their materials and labor, we developed a calculator that could be used for every project that was being priced. Now, if you don't have access to this calculator, a general rule of thumb is to add 17.5% to the cost of sale in order to cover all the fixed expenses for the business, which includes a market salary for the business owners. Now, the reason for this is because 17.5% markup equals a 15% margin, and that is the typical fixed expense ratio for a residential building company, and that is your true break-even point. And in order to make a net profit that will enable you to grow your business safely and securely, you need to add a lot more than 17.5%. So now, can you see why 75% of residential building companies make less than 3% net profit a year, which is why successful operators run their building companies by applying a 33.3% markup to new construction in order to generate double-digit net margin. Now, building companies focused on large-scale renovations work on even higher margins. Typically, they add around about 55% markup. Now, out of interest, how many How many builders here have been or seen projects on mates rates for others, thinking it wasn't really costing them anything? Or maybe you've actually done it yourself, or maybe you've seen another builder do it. But type in the chat box and let me know. Have you ever done that, Pierre? That's a bit of a giveaway there. Jason's guilty. Ingrid's guilty. Yeah, it's very, very common. Who's that? Craig is in the middle of a build just like that now. So yeah, it is very, very common. I mean, is this making sense to everyone? Can you see how each and every job is really costing money on top of the labor and materials? And we got to be fair to friends and family, and maybe even your own supervisor, who won't understand the true cost of running a building company. So you've got to be very, very clear right from the start. And a lot of people out there, they believe because they got a friend who's a builder, they're going to get the job done for virtually nothing. And then they get really disappointed and even a bit angry when they realize that the cost that they've been charged is not that much difference to full retail. So you've got to be really, really clear with your communication. So truly knowing your numbers, it's so important. And when you do understand them, you can increase your profitability very, very quickly, just like Campbell did. I mean, think about this. What would an extra 4% net profit mean to you in your building company? And it doesn't take long once you commit to implementing. I mean, Campbell did it in 8 months and he is still on this upward trajectory. Now, when I share this with a builder for the first time, sometimes I still get a response along the lines of, yeah, but it's not really costing me because this is work I would not have normally done. Therefore, it really is just extra. But I want you to think about this. How many jobs can you do at one time in your building company? Now, let's just say 10 happens to be your limit. How many family projects can you take on in addition to those 10? I mean, the answer, it's got to be 0, hasn't it? And if you think, well, I'm geared up for 10 right now, but I've only got 8 on the go and I don't have anything coming through in the pipeline, so I might as well just do these guys a favor. Well, the problem with this approach is what you need to be doing is scaling down your resources to reflect a capacity of 8 concurrent builds in order to optimize your profitability. Now that is your responsibility as a director of a building company. It is to maximize shareholder returns, not to subsidize other people's homes. And that may sound a little harsh. A lot of people don't agree with that approach, but it is a harsh reality in business. These jobs are coming straight out of your pocket. Now, one thing to remember about the break-even point is to only ever use it as a reference point rather than an indication of just how low you can go to buy a job. Now, there may be some rare times when you need to use a short-term tactic like buying a job in order to maintain your revenue at a minimum level. However, always keep in mind that a project at break-even is not worth winning, especially in this current climate of rising costs. You'd be better off scaling down and spending your time figuring out your marketing strategy rather than winning a project that did not generate any net profit. Because with all the risk and the time involved, it is simply not worth it. And also, don't add unrealistic contingencies to a profit thinking that is, unrealistic contingencies to a project thinking that is how you'll make a profit, because accuracy is the key when it comes to forecasting project costs. Better information leads to better decisions. Get your budget accurate and factor in a proper net margin. And talking of accuracy, don't rely on project costs plus the fixed expense ratio that I did mention earlier when pricing jobs. It is a reasonable indicator, just like a free estimate is a reasonable indicator of how the fixed price quote will turn out. But it's not completely accurate, and it can be affected by the complexity of the job, the location, and the length of the project. So bigger, more complex jobs, they take longer. They require more gross profit to cover the proportional fixed expenses. And the only way to calculate those jobs accurately is by using the pricing for profit formula. Now, one other tool, I'm going to mention this quickly to you guys because it's one that builders rave about to us. One other tool that will help you with this part of the process as well is what we call construction slots. And this is a process of, if you do have a capacity or you plan on signing 12 jobs at the beginning of the year, construction slots allocates the start dates for those jobs, say, for instance, one a month, and then you allocate those slots. And what that does, that gives you scarcity and urgency in your sales process. It is a phenomenal way to actually grow your margins, because once you've got scarcity and urgency, it gets people over the line quicker into the contract. They get allocated a slot, and it means when you're talking to people in the sales process as well, it's, well, I've got one slot available for April. The next one I've got available isn't until November. So unless we get this signed today, I can't allocate you that slot. So it's just a phenomenal way to be moving more clients. And the more clients you move into your construction funnel, the more you can raise your margins, because demand is outweighing supply. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on that very quickly. But having said all that, remember what Warren Buffett always says: never lose money, ever. Now I need your feedback again in the chat box, guys. Is this all making sense? Can you see how it really is possible to eliminate the guesswork in order to operate a professional building company that makes money? Let me know in the chat box, because right now, at this point, you've got two choices. You can quote a price that you simply hope you will make a net profit on after taking into account your fixed expenses, or you can quote a price that you know will take you past your break-even point and into net profit, which is what we're going to go into next. It's my favorite part. Matthew is getting there. So yeah, I mean, we're going to do a bit of Q&A at the end, Matthew. So if there's any points that you feel I've glossed over and you need a bit more detail, yeah, we can always answer those. But let me know, guys, is it making sense, Robbie? It's adding up those fixed expenses that make it tricky. Not really, because they will be, or they should be, forecast in your accounting package. So whether you use QuickBooks Online, MyOb, or Xero, you got your fixed expenses as a record of last year. What you need to be doing is budgeting for the year ahead for what your fixed expenses are going to be, based on your business plan, of course, as to how big you want your business to be. And then you got your total number, and then using a simple calculator, which will allocate the correct amount to the job. That makes it, it's probably a lot easier than you realize, Robbie. That's probably all I say at this point. Cool. Excellent. Making sense. Just need to put it in action. Absolutely, Ryan. That's what this is all about, isn't it? It's one thing hearing about what you need to do, but it's the guys that take action that get the results. So spot on, Ryan. Okay. Now this is really important, because this is how you are guaranteed to always make a profit on your jobs. And it is simply by adding a net profit margin to your projects rather than a gross profit margin. And that obviously is, as we know, that's how most of the industry currently operates. Now, a lot of residential builders, they believe that the best way to price a project is by adding a percentage or even a dollar figure to the total cost of materials and labor. And this is known as adding a gross margin or a gross profit. And the problem with this approach is that the builder is simply hoping to make a net profit rather than planning how much net profit they will make, as Jonathan's story clearly illustrates. So it was around 2011 when I met Jonathan and his business partner for the first time. And these guys were equal shareholders in a custom home building company in Brisbane that had been operating for almost 2 years. And at this time, I was acting as a building broker. I was connecting consumers that were looking to build a new home with builders that needed more work. And this was the first time I'd worked with Jonathan. So I sat down and I asked him, I said, how much do you generally make on your contracts? And he said to me, he said, well, typically, we add on 20%, but by the end of the job, we're pretty happy if we manage to clear 15%. So I asked him, I said, well, what happens to the 5% that disappears? And he said, yeah, you know what it's like in this game. He said, cost overruns, this and that, but all we need to do is get the revenue up, and 15%, that's going to work just fine for our building company. So here we had a business owner that was losing a quarter of their gross profit. But rather than try to fix up that problem, they mistakenly believed that they could simply scale their way out of trouble. And the problem is, it does not end well for a builder or a building company that tries to grow while operating on a gross margin that barely covers their fixed costs. And at 15% gross margin, all these guys were doing was breaking even. And 4 years later, after scaling their company to an $8 million a year business, the whole thing collapsed with massive debts that sent both of the business partners personally bankrupt. Now, the problem for these guys was that they did not understand their numbers. They didn't understand that a 20% markup equated to a 16.6% margin. And they didn't understand that a tiny 1.6% cost overrun on each project was wiping out their entire net profit. And they also didn't understand that as they scaled their building company and put on more and more resources, it actually took their fixed expense ratio to 18%, which meant they were now losing 3% on every project they completed. Or if we put that into dollar figures, 18,000 in hard cash. And that was because on the surface, everything looked great. They had cash in the bank. Suppliers and subcontractors were all being paid on time. And because they believed that they were successful, they'd even started doing their own developments, all at cost, without factoring in fixed expenses. And that meant the business was really losing around about $100,000 on each of those projects. And as you can imagine, by the time this particular building company was wound up by the liquidators, the whole was over $1 million. Now, there are a few things that these guys could have done a lot better. Understanding the difference between markup and margin, that would have helped with correlating the expected gross profit with the budgeted fixed expenses for the business. Now, having a project review at the end of each job where the learnings from cost overruns and timeline blowouts were fed back to the estimator, that would have helped to improve the accuracy of all their future budgets. And understanding the exact fixed expense to ratio, fixed expense to revenue ratio for their building company as they scaled it, that would then have helped them to avoid signing up projects below cost. And it would have certainly made them think twice about committing to so many of their own spec homes, which only serve to undermine their core business. Now, sadly, all of these things were overlooked by both partners, leading to yet another residential building company collapsing and impacting the lives of the owners, suppliers, and subcontractors who all lost significant amounts of money. Now, the best way to operate a residential building company is by implementing a pricing for profit model, which adds net profit to a project rather than gross margin. And in order to add a net margin, the builder needs to calculate the amount of fixed expenses that must be added to each and every job based on the timeline and their capacity for concurrent jobs. Now, a building company with annual fixed expenses of, let's say, $900,000, for instance, that building company would need to apply $3,750 per day to all of their jobs in order to simply break even. Now, a quick calculation to arrive at this figure is 900,000 divided by 48 working weeks in a year, because we don't work 52 weeks a year, divided by 5 days per week. Now, if this particular building company has the capacity and also the pipeline to run 5 projects at a time, that then equates to $750 per day per job. And that is the amount of fixed expenses per day divided by 5 projects. Now, in order to establish the break-even point for any particular job, all the builder needs to do is multiply the daily rate per project by the number of working days the project will run for, and then add that figure to the cost of materials and labor. And you now have a true break-even figure, which means any profit added to this number will be pure net profit. Now, the goal for any residential building company is to exceed 10% net profit. However, that may not be possible straight away if the building company does not have the marketing structure in place to generate the required amount of sales opportunities that will enable the business to increase its margins. And that is because of the law of supply and demand. And it is also why margins are linked to marketing. Now, I do hear a lot of builders say stuff like, well, duh, it's easy to just say, put your prices up. But if I did that, I would not win a single job. But here's the thing. Yes, you would. And the reason behind that is because margins are linked to marketing. But before we go too much into this, I just want to invite Julian in here, because Julian, I think you wanted to share with the guys just how they can put this fixed expense into Buildxact and then monitor that as they progress through the job.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I was going to jump in a bit more there, but you're on a roll, so I thought I'd leave you to it. But yeah, guys, I just wanted to talk really around kind of what Russ has just sort of gone through there and how to manage that in Buildxact. There'll be a lot of you that use us. So Russ, if you don't, yeah, that's awesome. I'll just share my screen quickly.
Read your mind.
Yeah, there we go. So guys, for those of you that aren't familiar, this is Buildxact. So I'm just jumping into an estimate that I've already created, and you'll see in a second that I use the same quote template about 1 million times. So I'll just open this up. And what we're really doing is we've already got all our costing categories in there. So these are all the things that we're going to be pricing for the job. So, you know, you've got your concrete, you've got, you know, carpentry, all that kind of stuff. So what we're really doing here, kind of as to Russ was sort of talking, is sort of accounting for your fixed costs in your job. So really all you want to do is you can add this any way you want, but I'm just going to add a new category and I can just call it fixed costs, just like that. And then I can just add a new item. Now, if you want to break this down to multiple items, I guess that's perfectly fine, Russ, but we're just going to keep it really simple of just adding a line in, and we're going to do this really working it out as Russ just shown per day, but then we're just going to add it up to a week because, you know, most people that use us won't have day jobs. So we'll just add fixed costs in, and then what do we say, Russ? Was it $750?
It was $750 a day, so that would be $3,750 per week, and then we are going to multiply that by the number of weeks that the job is going to run for.
Yeah. So should we say something like, I don't know, 25 weeks, something like that?
Yeah.
So there we go. That basically works it out for you guys. So what that's effectively doing is just that's adding it into your budget. So that when you start your cost tracking side of the job, well, it adds into your budget and your costs for your quote. So you've always got those fixed costs accounted for. But then when you start cost tracking against the project, so you start the job, you know, you're a month into the job, you're basically just sort of saying, hey, we're 1 week down, we're 2 week down, we're 3 week down. So we're actually spending this money. And then if you go a week over, 2 weeks over, it's going to start to show you, hey, you know, you've added an extra $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 onto your job. And as kind of Russ was sort of talking about there, is that's where those are the sort of things that profit margin gets really, really eroded by. A lot of people don't see that as an issue when they're doing things manual, because you don't really have the visibility to see that. When you kind of use a system, you get real clarity on how the job is performing. Because, you know, we speak to people and, you know, the estimate, even just for the materials, are wrong because they're not up to date. Then their quoting is wrong. So, you know, you actually think you've got a 20% margin, you've actually got 15, and then you have a few issues on the job. And then if you don't understand markup margin, that's even worse. And then your fixed costs also come into it. So you end up with a profit margin of, you know, next to nothing. And then that's how you end up having issues on your project. So we just give people more visibility on it. And, you know, as you go through this, it will start to go green or red as you start to go over or under it. But yeah, I just wanted to show you how simple that was to add in. So once you've worked the figure out, sort of average that out across the year, how much it costs per day, and then you can just simply just add it straight in. Obviously, it doesn't need to be 100% accurate on every single little thing. There's always going to be slight differences of how long project's going to go for, but this just gives you something to work towards when you're using our system.
And that's awesome, Julian, because that is how, it's as simple as that. We've transitioned from adding a gross margin, where now anything we add to this job is going to be a net profit. It's how much we plan to have over at the end of the job. The target is 10%. You might not get to there straight away, but this is fantastic, because one of the key things I think in business is what gets measured improves. And what gets reported, gets respected. There's all these things. But when you start focusing on this, it enters your subconscious. The painters, don't show up on site, and it's pushed it back a couple of days. Now you're thinking that 2 days, that's cost me $1,500, that 2-day delay. And that is a really important number to not only be aware of yourself, but to make sure you share that with your team, with your supervisors. The team need to understand that's $1,500 coming off the bottom line, not the revenue, not the gross profit, but the bottom line. And then, of course, the subcontractors as well. And I'd even recommend having a template set up so that when you do get let down by a subcontractor, you can send this email out. That has cost us $1,500, or if it's a week, $3,750, in delays. We've got to make these subcontractors aware of the cost of delays as well. And you may find that by creating a log and a record, it's the guys that maybe you favor the most. It might be the favorite subbies that you find that are possibly letting you down the most as well. That's what we tend to find happens, and we just don't notice it sneaking up on us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, access to data is the main thing. I mean, I do it with my steps. If I check my steps, I'm more likely to keep on top of them. I was working for a business in the UK where we actually got full breakdown of the financial performance of the business. Every staff could see that in the individual branch. So it's a car rental. I remember we missed damage. You sit down with someone and say, well, that missed damage has cost the business this much money, and that was what we used as a sort of the mentality that we had, that everyone had visibility. You could always see where the money was going and how it was, being spread across the business. So yeah, completely agree with that.
Yeah, we got some good questions come in as well, Julian.
Yeah,
is it okay
if we sharing anyway? So
how to calculate this if your it's just dropped off. How to calculate this if your sales inflates? This is an excellent question, and it's probably one of the biggest reasons why builders struggle to maintain profitability as they grow, because their growth is effectively unplanned. Now, the way we growth, first of all, when it comes to net profits, it's not linear. It follows what we call the S curve, which means you'll have a nice bit of growth. It will drop back as you put more resources on your profitability. You kind of go backwards, and then you do grow again, which can be quite painful as a business owner. However, when you plan for growth, and this is what we're talking about here, we're talking about planning the year ahead and then executing the plan. When you use this plan in conjunction with construction slots that I mentioned earlier, we never deviate from our construction slots. So that means our sales don't inflate because we're following a plan. And that can be quite a tough concept to get your head around. But what it does do is it opens up the opportunity to increase margins, because margins are all related to supply and demand. So when we cap our supply and we generate more demand, we can put more margin on, and that way our fixed costs don't increase either. So that's the way, Jason. Hopefully that makes sense, Jason. That's how I would answer that question. We don't allow our fixed costs to inflate in line with the potential sales. We cap our sales and we say no. It's a tough discipline, but you'll make a lot more money. We got Daniel. Would that just be your overheads or staff labor? The staff labor in terms of carpentry, for instance, would go into your cost of sales, so it's not part of your fixed costs. So hopefully that answers.
I think he might be talking about like maybe office or admin team.
Okay, in terms of that, yes, that is part of your fixed costs. So yes, your admin staff, contract admin, even I would go as far as a project manager that's working across multiple projects. You would put that cost into your fixed costs rather than your cost of sale, because that's effectively what we're doing. We're proportioning out our fixed expenses across different jobs. Much easier way of doing it than trying to work off timesheets to see how much time they spent on a job. Sherelle is saying, do you apply the markup margin to the fixed costs as well, or zero out that line? Yeah, because what we're now doing, once we've included the fixed costs into our budget, like we just saw Julian do within Buildxact, what we're now adding is a net margin rather than a gross margin. So whereas you might have been working towards hopefully a 33% markup, 25% margin, you're now thinking in terms of net because you got those overheads covered. So you're probably going to be working on, the target would be 11% markup, which would be about 10% margin net. You can go beyond that. We've seen new construction go as high as 14-15% in a strong market, but the reality is if you don't have the marketing in place and the sales process in place, you might be closer to 2 or 3. Matthew is saying, what if we put our staff labor in a different category, i.e. full-time chippy on site as his cost logs in a different category? Yeah, I think we covered that. So they should be in the cost of sales, not the fixed expenses. Nicola said this sounds like it is good to help work out liquidated damage for the sub. Absolutely, yes. And also as well, I might add, when we price a variation, because sometimes there might be a change in tiles which might lead to a week or 2 delay. We don't always factor in what that delay is costing us, and we need to be aware of that. So yeah, I would advocate including it into the variations, but that might be a challenge with a lot of clients. We might, even if we have to disguise it, we have to consider it for sure. Very, very important. It is a cost.
Russ, on that, when you do a variation in Buildxact, you are allowed to put in delay days on it.
Excellent. You guys are on it.
Yeah, you could just add another line in, add it to the category of a fixed cost in there, so you're keeping it in line, because when you do a variation, you can have multiple different cost lines on different categories. So you could push a line up to there that is effectively accounting for that increase.
That's awesome. A quick poll quick question to answer in the chat. How many of you guys are doing that already? How many are utilizing this? That is an awesome feature, Julian, but how many of you guys are utilizing that feature and adding that cost in? Yes, Matthew is fantastic. Yeah, awesome. So we did that.
Craig said the same.
Yeah, cool.
Craig's adding it in.
Fantastic. I think we've covered them all. Bobby is saying, so are we supposed to add that 93,000 to our BOQ? I guess it depends what's attached to that question. If you're sharing your BOQ with your client, which I wouldn't recommend doing, too much detail leads to too much questions. Effectively, it kind of, that is part of the cost of building.
Now, I think there's a bit of a, adding that much onto your quote, but, you are effectively dropping that gross to net margin.
Yeah, exactly. You're presenting it a different way. Yeah. And a way that, covering. Yeah, because a client is never going to believe that the fixed expense ratio for a building company is 15%. Yeah, they're simply, they're not. Yeah, they're not close enough to it. They don't understand what goes into to running a residential building company. So yeah.
Well, I think from my experience, Russ, I think people sometimes can be a little bit like, I'll shave 1% off to try and win that job.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes they necessarily don't realize that by doing that, that's actually putting a lot more stress and pressure on that end profit margin.
Yeah, for sure.
When you covered your fixed costs in there, maybe you could potentially, I know you don't have to advocate that, but maybe if you felt like you were forced to drop, you could sort of drop a little bit with, the confidence that the other costs are taken care of.
Absolutely right. Yeah. And it's okay to negotiate because it depends on the circumstances. Keeping a building company operating at optimal capacity helps cover the fixed expenses, which leads to more profitability. But it's important to do that full in the knowledge. Better information leads to better decisions. So as long as you understand why you're doing that, then that's important. A lot of time I do hear a lot of guys tell me like, we drop the margin because it's a very good build, it's on a good location, but it's very rare that you do realize the full value of that discount that you've offered. So I'd be a bit cautious on that one. I think that's sometimes something we just tell ourselves. But the law of supply and demand, it's why margins are linked to marketing.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, one thing I would say, and just going back to what we hear a lot of time, when we kind of go through this, it's like it's easy. I understand that, if I put my prices up, I'm going to make more money, but I'm not going to win a job. And builders are always surprised how easy it is to put the prices up and win jobs. You might not get to the benchmark straight away because you haven't got the marketing in place, but you will easily put your prices up a couple of percent. And it's all about delivering with confidence. You won't miss a beat, especially in this market. I mean, if you can't get the higher margins in this market, the market we've experienced over the last couple of years, it's going to be a lot tougher in the years to come, I guarantee. But a good indication, if you cannot charge the prices that you need to charge in order to generate a 10% plus net profit, it is not because of the price being too expensive. It is because of the perception of value by the consumer. In other words, your marketing has failed. It has failed to demonstrate your value. And it's also failed to generate enough opportunity that your service becomes a scarce resource, going back to what we said about capping your supply. Obviously, we don't have time to go into sales and marketing here, but I think it's really important to know that 33% markups on new construction are the norm for professional building companies, not the exception. And with the right process, you can achieve those margins as well. It's just a process. And if you're thinking, well, that sounds great, but I need to win jobs right now at higher margins, not in 6 months' time when I fix my marketing, then start by educating your prospects, because marketing will automate a lot of what you can do and scale. It will scale the education, but you can educate them right now every time you speak to them. So if you're currently marking up by 20%, which is a 16.6% margin, you're not going to go to 33% straight away, but you can go to 22% while you work on your marketing strategy, and then just build from there. And as you do create more demand, like I say, limit that supply using construction slots, because that will enable you to get to the correct margins before you really ramp up and start scaling your building company. And then that will ensure that you got profitable growth, rather than experience that profitless boom that so many builders have endured over the past 18 years now, 18 months, 2 years. And when you got the right process, the right templates, success follows. And you follow what Julian just showed us there, that will make such a difference to your building company. And just one more tip here for the guys: when you're pricing a project, don't think about how much the client's going to pay. Don't get it into your head that they got this budget and they're not going to pay more than the budget. Go in with the price you need to charge, which is in line with your business plan, because when you've got more demand than you can supply, it just makes it easy to execute that business plan. And most importantly, you get less emotionally attached to the outcome of each sales meeting. And you say, this is the price. And it's a lot easier than you may think. And I only say that from what builders have told us. A lot of builders, they're initially shocked when they increase their margins, and then the prospect signs up. But really shouldn't be the price. Shouldn't be a surprise, because the price is the price. And never, obviously, try and compete with another builder's price if you're not seeing their quote. We all know no two quotes are the same, even if they relate to the same plan. So, and even seeing the actual quote, it's only the first step. You can still win that project at a higher price without matching, that builder's lower price. But again, sales and marketing, we simply don't have time to go into that. But switch to a design and construct model, because that is where the margins are. Don't get caught up quoting against other builders. Design and construct. Take that consumer out the market at design stage. Our data proves that the margins are way higher when you follow that process. And always remember, markup is or margins are linked to marketing. It's not just about getting the price right. You've got to improve all aspects of your building company. So, I do have something special for you guys to give away, just like I mentioned at the beginning. But I just want to make sure, if you were able to establish the break-even point for every project before you quoted a price to the prospect, and then you were able to add a percentage to that break-even point. So you added a net profit to every job, and then you increased demand for your services by fixing up your sales and marketing. Do you think you could increase the amount of net profit your building company makes each year? Just go ahead, type in the chat box, guys, because I want to make sure that I delivered on my promise before we started this presentation. And also let us know in the chat box, what's the number one thing you got out of this presentation? And maybe even more importantly, what's the number one thing or the first thing that you are now going to learn more about in order to implement it into your building company? Because I love hearing from builders about what they got out of our time together, and what they're going to do next, which is most important. And while you're doing that, I just want to mention last month we did release a brand new action plan for builders, which covered all of the industry benchmarks. Now, this action plan, it takes you through all of the important key performance indicators for a residential building company, and that enables you to benchmark your own business against the industry standards. And this particular action plan is currently being sold on our website for $497 US, which is over 720 Australian dollars at the current exchange rate. But because you're here today, and if you click on the link that I'm about to put into the chat box right now, you can download it for free, because that link contains a special coupon code which will discount the price by 100%. And you know what that means, guys? It means your hourly rate has just shot up to $720 for the past hour. So I don't know if you've got time, Julian. Happy to answer any questions that might be coming through.
Yeah, I've got time. So there was a question up there for a little bit. I'll find it. I think I mentioned, I'm not sure I mentioned before, but Craig said that he discloses a fixed cost day rate so that the client doesn't have any surprises.
Yep. Yeah, the only thing I'm never too keen on is when we go down that path too much and start talking too much about cost numbers. It does focus the client's mind on the price and the margin, and it's why we see builders that operate a cost plus model struggle to reach the margins that a builder that focuses on fixed price contracts. They can achieve much higher margins, and the reason for that is they steer away from the nitty gritty of what the costs are and what the margins are, and they focus on the emotion and the end result. And as we know, buying decisions are made on emotion and justified with logic, and the more we can do that, the more we can or you'll find it easier to get contracts across the line on higher margins.
Russ from Jason as well. So he's basically saying that if you had 5 homes a year, that was your sales pipeline, that you're gonna build 5 homes. You actually won 10 homes a year, didn't have any impact on your fixed costs increasing, so the team could handle it perfectly fine. You've now got double the homes. Do you add the same fixed cost day rate into those jobs, even though effectively they've already been covered by the first 5, and just take it as a bonus?
Well, it depends how you're setting up your plan, because if your resources can cover 10, and your plan, including your marketing, your current sales funnel, it supports the fact that you're going to get to that 10, then that's what you're going to work on. But if your resources can cover 10, I think this is probably where the question is, but you realistically think you're only going to hit 5, you need to work out that needs to be your plan. The plan needs to be 5. And I would suggest that your marketing isn't mature enough to take that business to 10, in which case you don't want to be signing up 6 or 7 just because you can. You want to cap at 5 and build up this wait list, this delay. The goal is to be overbooked, because what you're effectively doing is working on your margins first. And probably the other thing to that is, if you've got a building company that can cope with 10, but it's only realistically going to be doing 5, you are over-resourced. There are bits in your fixed expenses that you need to be trimming down, because no company should have a capacity double what it's expecting to operate on.
I mean, I think most of it then was commentary, Russ. So a lot of people saying that they're understanding, you know, how the costs work and, you know, marketing and things like that. So, which I think you've covered off.
We got a good one there from Nick. Is it smart to quote jobs in the current climate on a fixed price contracts that's on your waiting list? Yeah, it's a very good question here. So yes, but, and this is what we've advocated even from the beginning of COVID. We could see this coming with demand going through the roof. It became obvious to us at the back end of 2020 that the cost of labor we felt was going to explode. Didn't necessarily see the explosion in the cost of materials so much, but we knew there were going to be cost blowouts. And it's at that stage we started advising our members to reprice contracts before they started the job. Now, there's a lot of bad publicity around this where builders effectively put out additional costs to clients halfway through the build, and that was unjustified. It was bad business practice, but fully justified to reprice a job just before you start it, giving the client to back out of the job and have their deposit refunded. It's the ethical way to approach it. It's fair on both parties. It means there's no surprises, but then at that point you can commit to a fixed price with a contingency based on previous experience to see you through that. And that has served our members well, even through 20% year-on-year cost escalations. Builders were caught out initially, but through 2022 they were very, very profitable. So I guess to answer that question, it is smart to quote jobs on fixed price even through the current situation, but you do have to have a process for repricing them, and to do that in an open communication manner with the client.
There was a couple of people there asked about the recording. So guys, the webinar is recorded. We normally put it up on our YouTube page pretty soon after the webinar. So check there, but you will get an email with it as well.
Yeah, excellent.
So Craig, sorry if I've missed someone else. I'm just going to scroll a little bit. Pierre's mentioned about Russ. You were going to touch on the difference between markup and margin. I think you did already.
Oh, we can cover it. We can cover it off again. No problem. So markup is the percentage applied to your cost of sales. So that budget that you've put in Buildxact, maybe it comes to 800,000. The percentage you apply to that figure is known as a markup. So if we were to apply 25%, which is 200,000, we've now got a contract value of 1 million. If we look at the profit, which was 200,000 as a percentage of the contract value, which is 1 million, that is 20%, and that is what's known as a margin. Now, these terms do get used interchangeably, especially in our industry. Causes a lot of confusion, and it does lead to builders leaving money on the table. So if you have a building contract that entitles you to charge 20% margin on variations, or we recommend crossing that number out and putting 25%, then that entitles you to, if it is 20% margin, that entitles you to mark up your cost by 25%. And if it's 25%, it entitles you to mark up by 33%. You will have to educate the client, because about 1 in 5 clients will question it. You will have to educate them. And that is easy by linking to online information that explains the difference between markup and margin. And most people will feel embarrassed then when you've kind of pointed it out to them. No, you're referring to like margin, and yeah, this is the markup. So you know, it can be done, but that's the difference, Pierre. Craig was asking about the take on the demand for builders in the future market. I think there's no question that the market is going to soften. Still seeing it very, very strong around the country. Certain pockets. I was talking to a group of builders in Adelaide yesterday. Demand is still through the roof for them. Other areas have started to experience a softening, but without question, we're going to see the market soften as the year unfolds, and even more in 2024, and that is simply because every time we get an interest rate increase, it reduces consumers' capacity to borrow. And although at the moment that's not affecting the high end one bit, because these people are very cashed up and they're not reliant on borrowings, it is impacting the lower end of the market, which in turn will have an effect on the higher end.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, Russ, as well, as I think, with the interest rates going up, the amount of money you can borrow. I think I worked out yesterday, I think two people, both on 100K a year with 1 or 2 children. I think it's dropped the amount you can borrow. This is just a Commonwealth calculator, but I think it was showing me about 150, 200K. When you factor in, price rises, labor cost increases, all those kind of things on top of it, that's a pretty big,
yeah.
jump.
So the real amount, what you can actually get for your money has reduced even more, hasn't it? I guess that's and that's what the feedback we were getting from our members. Their budgets are being, or their capacity to borrow has been reducing, but their expectations aren't, making it challenging for builders, which is why those marketing and sales skills have got to be dusted down and put back into play. Because it has been easy. Let's be honest, it has been easy to sign contracts over the last 2 years. No one's had to try too hard. Consumers have been chasing builders, but we don't want those skills to become a forgotten art. And Ely has put in a beautiful explanation there of markup and margin, gross profit divided by cost of sale and gross profit divided by sale price. So thanks for that, Ely.
Yeah, Nick's just said they repriced the job from 2021. That was 120 grand more expensive.
Yeah. Huge. But the good thing is awareness of the cost increase in construction is so widely known that consumers have been accepting it as well and understanding this isn't builders gouging. Yeah, we do still see some negative comments towards builders, which you guys are never going to win. Everything's your fault. But we see that online, unfortunately, but not amongst the smarter consumers.
Yeah. And Mark's mentioned there, Russ, how do you combat certain trades setting their own prices versus what may have been budgeted, leaving no wiggle room and cost overruns?
Well, I think the easy way not the easy way, but the best way to combat that is through the whole process of quoting the jobs, actually putting these components out to the subcontractors to price themselves rather than using rates from an estimator. I think the rates are great for the initial estimate, but once we go to a fixed price quote, we should be communicating with the subcontractors and getting them to put a price on it. And then, of course, we've got to factor in inflation on top of that. And it's why when we quote a price, it's only valid for 30 days. So again, helps us bring scarcity and urgency into the conversation. This quote is only valid for 30 days. And of course, if there's delays to starting, we're going to reprice it again anyway. We do exactly that, but quotes are always only valid for 30 days and then not honored anyway. Yeah, and this is where we simply, before we start construction, we'll get a requote. And this is really where relationships come into play as well, because a subcontractor can say, for obviously, when we're looking at the finishing trades, especially, a painting quote, and they might not get to it for 6 months. It might have gone up considerably, but we can mitigate that increase by the relationship we have. But it does also mean that we have to use our experience in this industry to factor in, well, if construction costs have been going up 20% a year, we've got to factor in, well, these the finishing trades will have probably gone up 10% in 6 months' time. This is what we have to do now as business owners.
Yeah, and Russ, on that, you can always go in, if you're using Buildxact, Mark, so I'm not sure if you are or not, but if you are, you can go in and add individual markup on top of the overall. You are awesome. So you can just have your markup percentage that you add in on the bottom that covers every item on the job, and then you can go into specific items and add more on. So I would normally suggest that to people if they've got, an item or a material or something or a trade that's going to be a bit more complicated and that there's a bit more of a delay on that work, to add more markup on those items. So you can go and add individual if you've got a trade that, pretty
And that's a great feature for the current climate,
Yeah.
where inflation is going to have more of an effect on the trades coming in at the end and the beginning. So yeah, it allows us to easily factor that in without kind of trying to do a separate contingency calculation. So that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, just on the individual line, just scroll right to the end, just before you see all the prime cost provisional sum toggles. There's a markup button there. So you can add markup line by line on a category or on the job overall. So yeah,
Fantastic.
From Jason, for a business plan and quantity of jobs needed, would you say we should start with the team we need? Examples are estimator, supervisor, draftsman, sales, accounts, then calculate fixed costs based on that team, then average over a suitable quantity of jobs that can handle fixed cost distribution, thus equals the minimum quantity of jobs needed per year, then base the construction solely on that slot.
Yeah, look, exactly that, Jason. But this it's a process that it isn't a one shot and it's done. What you will find is you'll do this process and then you'll kind of look at it, and maybe it's had an effect on your net profit, and you think, I'm not working all year just to generate that. So you'll want to increase that, and then that might mean, you know, taking on more jobs or adjusting percentages. But you want to be looking at your fixed expenses in line with what you've said here in terms of what you've planned, and thinking, well, can I add some more jobs without having to put more fixed expenses on? Or, you know, there's a number of jobs I've now budgeted or planned for mean that I'm going to need even more. And you will find yourself going around in a loop, which, yeah, it's a bit of fun if you like numbers, to be honest. But yeah, it's not like a one-shot process. You will find yourselves like just tweaking a few numbers till you get settled and comfortable, and then you commit.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig just mentioned your Buildxact add a margin to all category items at once. Yeah, so Craig, when you're in your estimate costing screen, there's a line at the bottom. It's kind of like a white block that should show subtotal, markup, GST, and quote total. The dollar amount under markup will be blue. So anything in Buildxact means you can click it, edit it. So just click that. That will open up a little window that has 5 options to add markup against. So you can just add that, and that will add it onto the total job overall. So whether that's you have a markup percentage, a slight 1 or 2% for contingency, however you decide to break it up, it will add that across the whole job. And then it's really based on how you want to distribute that that markup against your prime cost provisional sums. By default, Buildxact won't show markup on your PCPS items, but you can turn that off because obviously that's visible to the customer, and you may not want to necessarily show the customer that information on, you know, the quote, but you can toggle that on or off. But best thing to do for anyone, if you have any questions, all you need to do is just go onto the need help box inside Buildxact. You can shoot us a message via the chat, or you can book a phone consultation at any point. So that's what I normally recommend people. People don't often know it's there, but support documents, there's heaps, so most of them should cover the questions.
And yeah, I think the other important thing to mention as well is utilizing the job schedule in Buildxact as well, to actually plan this job, because that's obviously key in pricing the job. You know, we do focus on the cost of goods sold, but we've also got to watch how long this job is taking. And just on that as well, and another tip is, consumers tend to fall into one of 3 categories in terms of what their priority is. Their number one priority, it's speed, quality, and budget. So, you know, first home buyers, it's all about budget. The high end custom home, it's all about the quality and the communication. But for some people, there's a deadline. You know, the Christmas deadline they got to be in by. And if you've produced your job schedule in Buildxact as part of your estimating process, include it at a high level, just the stages, not the components that make up the stage, just the stages. Include that in your proposal, because you are going to then demonstrate how they're going to be living in that home by the deadline. And when other builders don't do that, you're in a very strong position.
Yeah, I mean, the marketing sales side of it is and
yeah, we kind of, they always want all 3, don't they? If you say to them what's most important,
two more on top.
They're going to say, yeah, we want all 3. So yeah, you have to be a bit covert when you're identifying. Yeah, don't let them self-select.
I was going to say there, Russ, we've got selections coming through into Buildxact, so you'll be able to share photos of selections into the customer portal, so the clients can actually select, the things that they want. So
Awesome.
use all those sort of tools in your sales process to, set yourself apart from anyone else, where, some people might just be getting a printout of something, having a digital option where they can go in and select things. All those kind of things help justify why a margin increase is good for them. So
they're micro commitments, aren't they? And the
yeah.
more of those you get, the less it becomes about price. This is how, some builders are able to mark up their jobs by so much more than other builders. It's because, the little value adds like that, getting the client involved. Because once a client has been working with a builder and used their platform to make all these selections, they don't really want to go pricing it with other builders. It does happen, but invariably it reduces that risk considerably.
Yeah. And Jason just mentioned there, like, what's the best way to track pre-construction items in Buildxact? I mean, the thing of Buildxact is we don't really force you to do anything in a particular way. So you could just, in the quote and the costing side of it, you can simply just add more lines into it. If it's during the job and the client's already accepted the quote and there needs to be revisions and changes and things like that, just add variations. There's no right or wrong way, really.
I've seen it set up as a separate job schedule as well, to manage that whole design process, which can be quite long, and that can be quite useful as well, actually visualizing to the consumer as to what the design process looks like, just have them focused on that rather than thinking about construction and the implications of all these delays in decision making at design.
Yeah, exactly. Eli, regarding the selections would be great. Yeah, PDF reader for Buildxact to remove double handling with accounting software. Look, I don't have any information on that at the moment. I know it's something that we have looked into. My gut feeling is that at some point it'll be there, whether that's a two-way integration or a sort of a way to automate the transactions. Gut feeling it'll be there at some point. I just don't know when it would be, but if I was a betting man, I'd probably say at some point in the next 2 years, I would imagine. But yeah, don't hold me to that at all. That's based on no information other than what I know they're looking at into the software, because there's a lot more software improvements coming. So selections, obviously a big one, mobile app. Just if you're using Buildxact, just go on the explore section and there's like a what's new there, and that will kind of give you an up to date of what's happening. So yeah, Matt, mobile app is coming. And that's been a big one. I do a ton of events, and I'm actually driving to Albury in about 15 minutes. And I always hear at the events, mobile app, mobile app, mobile app. So yeah, I'm delighted to hear that coming as well. Obviously there'll be stages for it, but yeah, it is coming. Well, I think that's most of the questions, guys. I'll try and do a little bit of a Buildxact update every webinar that we do, just so you've got you've got a bit of an idea of what's coming in the software at the end of these sessions. But so Sherelle's from Albury. I'm going to a Master Builders New South Wales division night, I think the event's called. So yeah, it's tonight, so I'm going to drive straight up there, and you'll see me wearing this same shirt. Naomi, I don't know the full details of what's coming in the mobile app. I knew this would happen. As soon as I say something, everyone wants to know the exact thing that's coming. But look, I would imagine logically, these sort of things will ultimately happen. It's the beauty of being an online software. We're not a desktop software where you pay money up front and then that's it. These things are going to be continually evolving. Once you've got a mobile app, it's just going to continue getting better and better and better. So I would imagine initially there'll just be some basic job requirements, the first release, and then from then on it would increase. I'll see you tonight, Sherelle, then. Cool. I guess that's it, guys. Russ, obviously really appreciate you coming on. Great advice. I always enjoy listening to them in, because it gives me a bit more knowledge and back up things that maybe I've seen with people from customers and doing demos and things like that. And for obviously everyone here that's still on, and everyone that came on earlier, really appreciate if you're watching right now, or we notice a lot of people hop on the YouTube and channel and watch the videos after. So really appreciate whether you're listening now or in the future. And yeah, I'm sure you'll see Russ at some point soon. We're looking at doing a webinar with the Saucy, how
Saucy, yeah, State of the Residential Construction Industry report. Yeah.
So you saw Russ mention it earlier on that they do a report every year. Really, really good information in that. So we'll be doing a webinar where we kind of have a bit more of an open discussion on kind of the data from the report and what it's showing and the trends and things like that coming in this year and beyond. So yeah, look out for that one. But yeah, really appreciate having you on board, Russ, and thanks to everyone else. I'll finish off this webinar now, so it's not a long recording, and then I'll go pack my bags and get in the car.
Great stuff. Thanks so much, Julian, and thanks to everyone for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your time.